Putin is using to devastate Ukrainian homes, energy grids, and ports. As we saw this week, support for Ukraine is not just rhetorical, it's tangible.
Okay, but Israel's doing Putin
Dozens
shit
of countries came
in
together to
fucking
pledge to
Lebanon.
help Ukraine rebuild. The G7 and other partners made additional commitments to strengthen its energy infrastructure in the face of Russia's ongoing assault.
Do we have a
sending more equipment like turbine
maybe this has,
for Ukraine to win this war.
subtitles. Okay, here it
A
is.
discussion that they continued in Washington on Thursday, yesterday. To help Ukraine's courageous defenders and citizens, we announced a surge of support, $8 billion in new security assistance, including long-range munitions, an additional Patriot air defense system, and training for more Ukrainian F-16 pilots. Starting with the Quad Leaders Summit in Wilmington on Saturday and throughout this week, we've also advanced our vision for a free, open, secure, prosperous Indo-Pacific. President Biden met with Vietnamese General Secretary Do Lam to deepen the comprehensive strategic partnership between our countries. We're enhancing cooperation on everything from creating resilient semiconductor supply chains to addressing environmental challenges along the Mekong River. We'll continue those conversations in a couple of weeks when we get together at the ASEAN Summit in Laos. Along with my counterparts from Japan and South Korea, we took measures to institutionalize our trilateral cooperation, building on the historic Camp David Summit and reaffirming our shared commitment to creating a trilateral secretariat to advance this work. Just now, I concluded a candid and substantive meeting with China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi. We discussed steps to implement the commitments that our leaders made at Woodside last year, like working to disrupt the flow of synthetic drugs and precursor chemicals into the United States, improving communications between our militaries, discussing the risks of artificial intelligence. I emphasized the importance of maintaining peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait and raised concerns about the PRC's dangerous and destabilizing actions in the South China Sea. I also underscored our strong concern with China's support for Russia's defense industrial base, which fuels Russia's war machine and perpetuates a war that China purports to want to see ended. Over the course of the week, we also came together with our partners to address many other crucial challenges facing the globe. We worked toward a cessation of hostilities, unrestricted humanitarian access, and civilian governance in Sudan. We worked to garner additional resources and support for the multinational security support mission in Haiti. We coordinated steps to increase international pressure on the Maduro regime in Venezuela to stop its widespread repression of the Venezuelan people, to respect their will and their votes, as expressed at the ballot box. These tests, and so many more, underscore the magnitude of the challenges facing the globe, but also the imperative of diplomacy. We don't have the luxury of pulling back.
Oh,
in the coming
man.
hours, and for every remaining day of this administration,
So much
we'll
diplomacy
remain intensely
happening.
focused on addressing these challenges as we work to make a better world.
Let's just
Thank you.
play this over him. This is American diplomacy, folks.
Mr. Secretary, a senior Israeli official just briefed the press on today's operation and why they are still going into Lebanon. The senior official said that their intel told them that there was a plan to encircle Israel and eliminate Israel by 2040, that Sinwar on October 7th jumped the gun, that they have been defending themselves ever since, that they feel that Nasrallah was the key, the linchpin to all of this, and Hezbollah, that after a year they felt that they had to get people back in their homes, that they went after Nasrallah, and in today's strike were targeting him. Clearly, they don't know what they've achieved. They still feel that when in the military you have momentum, that you have to keep going, that they will be a lot farther along in their operation if it turns out that this was successful in their terms today, but that they still, he said, the official said, still have to keep going, and they are not ready to pause. From your conversations, what is your perspective about whether Israel continuing with this operation and not going in on the ground, which they said is not preferable. But if doing this in what they consider a targeted way is a legitimate response to what they see as an existential threat, or if there is an other alternative, a diplomatic alternative.
Andrea, I will let Israel speak to their operations and their objectives. It's not my place.
The American objectives and the American policy.
Look, we and many others have been clear about what we see to be the best path forward. And the objective that Israel has in the first instance in Lebanon is an important and legitimate one. It's creating an environment that's secure enough to enable people to return home. Because remember what happened starting October 8th. Hezbollah started lobbing rockets and missiles into Israel, trying to create another front in the war. And Israel, of course, had to respond to that. And in the process, tens of thousands of people had to evacuate their homes in northern Israel. Villages and homes were destroyed, southern Lebanon. And so we have large populations, both in Israel and in Lebanon, who've been forced from their homes. And it is a legitimate and important objective for Israel to, again, create an environment in which people can get back to their homes. The question is, what's the best way to do that? What is the most effective, sustainable way to do that? We believe, many other countries who joined us in putting out a call for a ceasefire for 21 days believe that the best way to do that is through diplomacy, through a ceasefire, and then reaching an agreement that pulls back forces from the border and gives people the confidence that they can go back to their houses, that the kids can go back to school. So we believe that's the best path forward. And the Israelis put out a statement earlier today sharing that they share the aims of
that was cool when Biden
call that we put out, again,
did
with
this.
the G7, with the EU, with key Arab partners. So the question is not, does Israel have a right to defend itself against terrorism? Of course it does.
Israel has a right to defend itself is just a fucking way to say Israel does whatever it wants, okay? There has never been territorial gain under the history of Israel, okay, for the past 76 years. There's never been additional territorial gain that hasn't had that security justification. This is the justification for all. That's how they fucking invaded the West Bank and occupied it, okay? That's why when people say Israel has a right to defend itself, they're doing this for defense. They just have to fucking fight back against Hezbollah. There it is. IDF has now officially announced evacuation orders for the southern suburbs of Beirut. You are located near Hezbollah interests, and for your safety and the safety of your loved ones, you are obliged to evacuate buildings immediately, which means if they give you an hour to evacuate, they'll do it in 15 minutes. It's coming. More bombing will occur while fucking Anthony Blinken is talking, while Benjamin Netanyahu's literally in U.S. soil, too. We haven't even gotten to the fucking dumbass Benjamin Netanyahu speech. Good stuff.
Administration clear position on the policy of targeted assassination. And if I may, please, one second question. You've emphasized for calm along the northern borders, and you have been working towards this goal for the past 11 months. Now, as we edge closer to a broader conflict, could you specify what do you mean by calm? Are you referring to a return to the pre-October 7 status quo, implying a cessation of hostilities, or the full implementation of Resolution 1701, because it does matter for the Lebanese and for the Israeli to understand what are you proposing? And just one final question. We are 2 weeks away from October 7, Mr. Secretary. What could you...
By the way, this will put the conflict back in the fucking forefront of the American population's interests. This is what I said when I told you early on that.
So first,
this is what I told you when I told you early on. Foreign policy is not the major point of contention ever. Far from it, until it becomes the only thing people care about.
What happened, what the intent was, and until we have that information, I can't address in detail our response to it. So we'll continue to work on that in the hours ahead. With regard to a broader conflict, we've said very clearly, you're right, ever since October 7th, that one of our objectives, besides making sure that Israel does what it needs to do to make sure that October 7th never happens again, besides doing everything we can to try to make sure that people who are caught in this horrible crossfire of
Yeah,
Hamas's
horrible
making,
crossfire.
and
People
who are
just
suffering
caught in it, dude.
terribly, women, men, children, in Gaza, that they get the protection that they need and the assistance they need. Besides that, our objective has been to try to prevent the war from spreading, as well as escalating. And on multiple occasions since October 7th, we seem to be on the verge of just that happening, including in the days immediately following October 7th, and then again on several other occasions, most notably in April, and even more recently than that. And each and every time, the combination of American deterrence and American diplomacy managed to prevent a wider war. We're intensely focused on doing exactly that now, along with many other countries, because in our judgment, in the judgment of so many others, it's in no one's interest to have a wider conflict. And so we're working in every possible way to prevent that from happening. Now, in terms of where we think this should go, no, going back simply to October 6th in terms of the border between Lebanon and Israel is not sufficient, because it's not simply a matter of having a ceasefire, that is, Hezbollah firing into Israel, Israel responding in a tit for tat. What's necessary is to create the conditions, including moving forces back, such that people in both northern Israel and southern Lebanon have the confidence to return home. It would be important, finally, to make 1701 real, not simply a piece of paper.
Israeli surveillance, a senior Israeli source tells CNN that a confirmation of Hassan Nasrallah's death could come at any moment. That's what they're saying, according to Ragıp Soylu from Turkey
years.
3
Part
3
of
minutes
that,
ago.
and through 1701, the understanding was that any of the armed militia would put down their weapons. The state should have a monopoly on the use of force. Hezbollah never did that. And it's presented an ongoing threat to Israel ever since, again, with the avowed goal of eradicating it. So in this instance, the most important thing to do, again, if the objective is to just get people home, get kids back to school in Israel and in Lebanon, most important thing to do through diplomacy is to try first
Yeah, there's
to stop
really
firing
trying diplomacy.
in both directions, and then to use the time that we would have in such a ceasefire to see if we can reach a broader diplomatic agreement on this. I think it would have to proceed in phases, but we have to have conditions on the ground such that people know with confidence that they can be safe in their own homes.
One-way flight prices to get back to the
And
U.S.
finally,
single ticket
as we come to
at this moment.
October 7th and the anniversary of that horror, our focus is not thinking about...
I want to point to something here. Once again, Israel always
and the
vaguely gestures towards some broad security concern when it engages in territorial acquisition in direct contravention with international human rights law. Okay? There has never been an instance where Israel's like, nah, we're just taking this fucking territory because we want it. Okay? It's always, oh, there are people here that we have to deal with militarily because of our security concerns. So we have to bomb them. Then they bomb them. They kill the civilians. That creates a lot more resentment amongst the civilian population there that then understandably rise up in arms against the fucking state, right? Then once that area is evacuated, then settlers come in. Israel either directly or indirectly allows these settlers to set up camp. Okay? Then comes the next problem. You have to protect these settlers. They're Israeli citizens. They're important. So then they go in and they bring in the military apparatus. They build encampments. They build entire city blocks. They build military. They build the military occupation. And before you know it, they've overtaken the entirety of the West Bank. There is never a situation where Israel says, we want it, we are going to take it, okay? They always use the vague security justifications. We have to secure our people. We have to secure Israeli interests. We have to secure Israeli citizens. And that's why we have to behave like this. So when people say Israel has a right to defend itself, when they say we just have to simply now invade southern Lebanon and occupy southern Lebanon because northern Israelis need to go back to school, they need to go back to work, that is precisely what they are saying and doing, just like they did in Gaza, just like they did in the West Bank, just like they did in Golan Heights, which is now permanently annexed internationally, not internationally recognized, but recognized by the United States as a part of Israel proper.
I think the question is one about individuals. The question is one about
Okay?
us and what is in the interests of the respective
That's it. No one ever fucking calls it like living room. The settlers do, but the Israeli state is not going to call it living space. They're not going to say Lebensraum,
interests
okay?
of all concerned
They're not.
really should go.
They're simply going to say security concerns. They're vaguely going to gesture towards that, but the ultimate goal is land acquisition, okay? The ultimate goal always is land acquisition. That's it. It's pure.
At horrifically high cost.
It's very simple.
We're caught in the crossfire that Hamas created. But those military objectives have been achieved. And so getting the hostages home, putting Gaza on a better path, I believe is in their interests. It's manifestly in the interests of people in Gaza who would get immediate relief from the war, immediate relief in terms of a surge of humanitarian assistance, and a commitment from the international community to help them rebuild their lives. And it should be in the interests of Hamas if, as it says, it represents the interests of those Palestinians in Gaza, because the ceasefire would advance those interests. So, irrespective of the individuals involved, the interests are clear, and whoever the individuals are, they'll have to make determinations and decide. Similarly, when it comes to Lebanon, same thing. It's clearly in the interests of the Lebanese people to have peace, to have security, to have stability, to not live under threat. And certainly in their interest to avoid a wider war where inevitably the biggest victim of such a war, those who would suffer the most, are the Lebanese people. And so those who purport to represent their interests and have their well-being at heart should find a way to act on those interests, irrespective of the individuals involved. And this is what so many of us are working to put forward. We've been very clear in not just what we've said, but also in what we've done, including the deployment of significant assets in the region, that we will do our part to deter further conflict, to deter escalation, to deter a widening war. And there are two sides to that coin. One, to avoiding that wider war. One is this deterrence, and we are committed to it. But the other is diplomacy. And as I mentioned before, on several occasions since October 7th, we've been on what we judge to be the brink of that wider war, and through a combination of deterrence and diplomacy, we've managed to prevent it. That's what we're focused on now, and all parties in the region, I think including Iran, know that and can see that. And then finally, with regard to Ukraine, I wasn't there because I was here in New York representing the President and the administration. So while I got a chance to see President Zelensky with President Biden briefly when they were both in New York, the meeting that took place yesterday was one that I wasn't part of. And I can tell you, though, from the readout that I got from the meeting, that it was not only very good and very positive, but among other things, it resulted in, or we announced at the same time, the provision of significantly more assistance to the Ukrainians, notably security and military assistance, more than $8 billion worth, that will carry us through the end of this administration. In the conversation between the President, President Biden, and President Zelensky, the Ukrainians presented their plan for victory, and I'll let them speak to the details of that, including what's necessary in their judgment to achieve it. And we are studying it very carefully, and that includes what, if any, additional things we or other partners of Ukraine would be called on to do in order to help them achieve that success. But the President's been very clear that he's committed to Ukraine's success. He's committed to making sure that they have what they need to effectively defend themselves as well. I've said it many times, and I'll say it again. Every step along the way, we've adapted and adjusted to those needs, and I'm convinced we'll continue to do so.
And for the final question, Mark Menier with South China Morning Post.
Hi, Mr. Secretary. Thank you very much. Brazil and China, a couple of hours ago, pushed further on this idea of sort of mediating with a peace plan. Can I get your reaction to that? Is it a distraction? Is there a useful part of that, particularly in light of President Zelensky's opposition to it? Related to that, Ambassador Nick Burns yesterday, I believe, basically signaled that there could be more sanctions on China related to their